Hi everyone, my name is Samantha Murphy-Kelly and we are doing a Google Hangout today with Chris Dancy, who is known as the world's most connected man. He has between 300 and 700 trackers tracking him at all times, and his story is fascinating. And it's also a part of a larger story that experts say is coming in the future. Will we be living like this in the future, and is this kind of the life that we want to lead? So first, Chris, thank you so much for joining us. Say hello to everyone.
Hello, everyone. Great to see you again, Sam.
Yeah, great to see you too. We spent a day in Chris's hometown of Denver last month, and we got to know a little bit about him, and we got to see his home, which was really special too. He has lots of trackers everywhere, but what was really striking about it is you would walk into his home and you would never really know it. They were kind of hidden in different areas, and that was really neat to see. So before we really dive in, Chris, can you tell us exactly what you have on you right now?
Oh, so I got the Oscar de la Renta red carpet.
Right.
So my body media, a Samsung Gear Fit, Jawbone, Fitbit, a Apple Watch. I think I have my narrative camera. Yep, there's my narrative camera. My posture belt, heart rate strap, and Google Glass. And then I've got sensors around me, you know, little things, and that's on me, physically wearing.
Right. And so you're in your office right now, and I know there's tons of sensors around you right at this moment. So can you tell us a little bit about what is happening behind you that we really can't see?
So I've got a Netatmo, which is a sensor that does indoor, they call it an indoor weather station. One of the neat things it does is it monitors ambient noise levels, and you can set a threshold on it. So if I talk this loud, you know, I get a little alert that I just spoke louder. And as you've seen, the house is kind of wired to me, so if I get too excited, you know, the lights will dim a little bit, and music plays and everything else. I also have a Cube sensor, and I'm a big fan of Cube. They actually have this whole routine where when you set up a room, and the Cube sensors are only, you know, so big, but they ask you, you know, is this room for sleeping? Is this room for resting? And then they kind of give you, like, best case scenario. So that sensor is measuring temperature, air quality, humidity, noise, drawing a blank, a bunch of other things, light, and air pressure. So, you know, is the room too bright? Is it too, you know, too dark to be reading? So a lot of times you get a little warning saying it's too dark in there, or it's too cold in there, put on a jacket. So it's fun.
Right. Great. And one of the, I encourage everyone, if you haven't already, to take a look at, Mashable did a longer piece with Chris, like I mentioned a few weeks ago, but it just came out last week. So I encourage you all to take a little time and look at the video, too, to learn a little bit more of what's happening. But inside the story is a picture of you, I believe, from 2012 versus 2013. And you lost so much weight just by tracking yourself. And could you just tell us a little bit about that process, and was that one of the main reasons why you started living this sort of lifestyle in the first place?
No, it's funny. Someone reached out to me after the article and said, can you show us the old data? And you see my Google Calendar, obviously.
Right.
I went back and sent them some 2012, and it's weird because the amount of data I was collecting in 2012 was still significant, but not nearly as significant as what I'm collecting now. So yeah, the weight loss was a big part of it was tracking. So I was clocking in at about 320 pounds. And I was like, you know, taking off all your clothes because you don't want to get weighed, you know, with any extra weight. And it was hard because, you know, when you weigh that much, and I was, you know, smoked a couple packs of cigarettes a day, you know, it's hard. You just don't even want to think about it. You know you should eat better, but you just don't think about it. So I just really wanted to understand my behavior a lot better. I was already tracking a bunch of information. So it was about a year into it before I really thought, well, could I use the same amount of information for tracking? So in that sense, what I did was I went back and looked for the difference between eating 3,500 calories and eating 3,200 calories, which is about 300 calories, which is a bagel, right? So, like, what's the difference? So then I took all those days out of my calendar, and I said, out of these days that are 32 or which is 3,500 calories, is there anything consistent? People, music, sleep, behavior, lack of behavior, what I'm watching on television, are the dogs acting different? Am I using, you know, different lighting? And then I just said, okay, these are the things that are common. And then I started mimicking the environment, so that it would work more like days where I ate less, to see if I could like environmentally change myself. And you were here. I mean, it was really interesting when you were here and you actually witnessed some of it. So, you know, scientifically, that's just a feedback loop, right? That's just things are happen and you respond to them.
Yeah. It was interesting, too, what you said about even certain people. If you were having lunch with somebody, you might eat more around certain people, which is so interesting, those things you wouldn't necessarily think about just going about your daily life.
Yeah, a lot of people are in this misconception that when I say people, I mean like people making you angry. And what I found, it wasn't the people that really made me feel really great or really bad. It was the people that I felt didn't have any effect on me actually had a very profound effect on me. And, you know, when it comes to like eating out, one of the things I learned really early was just light, you know. Samsung is a great phone. I use both the Samsung and an iPhone. I don't care about either one. The Samsung's got a great little app in it that just measures light in a room. So like you can go and launch this phone and just measure the light in any room you're in. One of the things I noticed was restaurants that were really brightly lit, I ate really fast. So I started doing things like eating closer to windows in restaurants, eating in restaurants that had, you know, lighting that was about between 80 and 140 lumens. So, you know, again, just the information itself, if you use it in a constructive way, is very powerful. You know, I don't need a Yelp review on how unhealthy the food is. I can go in a restaurant, you know, and just see the. And another thing about restaurants is sound. You know, really loud restaurants agitate you, and you can't really focus on really enjoying the food. So light and sound were biggies for me when I ate out, and then removing people and things were biggies for me when I was home.
Right. And you've been all over the world talking about your lifestyle, and you've spoken at companies, and you know you're sort of this poster child of this movement, everything. So I'm curious. Basically, I know we sort of talked about this too, but if you could give us a little bit of insight when people meet you for the first time, because like I mentioned in my piece too, it kind of dawned on me when we were talking, like, oh my goodness, you're like collecting all this information about me too. So does that make people nervous to talk to you, or excited at the same time because they're part of like your larger effort, or I guess where do people stand?
I mean, it really depends. I haven't had any experiences like you read about in the media where someone attacks you for wearing Google Glass.
Right.
You know, it's strangely enough, you know, they have no problems if you're taking pictures with your phone, but, you know, glass somehow represents a threat. And I think that's you and I talked about this. That's a conversation about privilege, not privacy. Mm-hmm. You know, if you can wear lots of technology, that's a privilege. You know, that's a lot of money. But many people don't have a response. And I do have some people who, usually the questions when I first meet people fall into, are you recording me? Mm-hmm. And that's the first thing. Even if I don't have glass, you know, are you recording me? And I'm like, no, I'm not recording you. Mm-hmm. Second one, second question I usually get, or like in the top three, is, do you have OCD? Or, you know, there would be some type of question about my mental health, which mm-hmm. is, you know, someone asked me today online from Italy, this great guy that I met, and he reached out to me and he goes, you know, does it bother you that people think you have OCD? And I said, no, it bothers me that people are that concerned about my mental health that they would actually have time to think about that. Right. And then, you know, I meet some people who just say, you're fascinating, and then that gives me a chance to actually chat with them. But yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I've hung out everywhere. I mean, spent some time with Coke, spent some time with Air New Zealand, hung out with a friend at Nike. You know, I've worked with a lot of really cool companies over the last 6 months, but this has been a 5-year journey. So, you know, 17 countries last year and 21 this year. You know, and it's just really important for me that people realize that a data-assisted lifestyle doesn't mean information overload, right?
Right.
Turning on a GPS doesn't cripple your driving, right?
Right.
It just empowers you.
And it's also a lot of stuff that you mentioned people are already being tracked by. So, like you said, a GPS system in a car, or even your credit card. So it's basically maximizing that.
It dawned on me, Samantha, when I realized my alarm, the company that we get our homeowners insurance through, would give us money if we let them put in cameras and sensors. My auto insurance company, was going to give me a discount if I let them put a sensor in my truck. My health insurance company gives me a discount for wearing a tracker. Mm-hmm. You know, the power company here in Denver and Colorado will give you a discount if you let them put in their thermostat. So it just, you know, all these systems are collecting information on you. You know, whether you choose to be a participant in that collection, I think, is really the bigger question that we need to have as a nation, because I think information is a civil right. And you know, lack of information, if it's hurting your health or hurting your family or hurting your own relationship with yourself, your ability to be kind to yourself, that's a health crisis. That's not an information crisis. And I think that's what we're facing right now is a health crisis.
Right. So just backtracking a little bit about interactions with other people, and I know we talked about this a little bit when I was there too, but also, you know, the dating scene. I guess when you meet somebody for the first time too, you want to put your best foot forward, make a good impression. I know you said that sometimes you just don't show up fully. You gradually ease them into things without, you know, being super geared out. Do you think that's just to kind of like you said, the goldfish analogy of like putting goldfish in a bag and like slowly dipping them into a new tank so they get used to it? Is that sort of the thinking behind that?
It used to be. I mean, it's hard now. I mean, I'm on OkCupid, and it's funny because people will be like, I read about you or I saw you, because, you know, there's a bunch of media has done pieces on me. And, it tricks, kind of, messes with your head when you're in France speaking and someone on Grindr says, hey, are you that guy? And you're
my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter. But, the other thing is you also have to live kind of transparently. So, like, yeah, that's me, So, and I'd like, you want to go out for dinner? Do you want to meet? So, oftentimes on these systems, I can't even escape, what that happens. But to that end, I try to explain to people, this is not about me learning about you. It's about me learning about me. Right. And I'm not going to measure you in intimate relationships, which I have. I don't measure those types of things. Coming out data sexual is something that involves two people. You can come out data sexual as yourself, but that's pretty lonely. So if you, as a couple, you both have to agree to these things. But again, if you look at how we're using our phones today, and how we're using all of this mobile technology, it's not very kind, and people are weaponizing how other people use information, which I think is so dangerous whenever you start judging someone else for how they're using information. It bothers me to no end that, in cities, kids get beat up for smartphones every day, yet we're having a dialogue about people getting beat up for Google Glass. Why don't we talk about the real problem, which is income inequality, and kids that are getting beat up for this sort of thing. So sorry to get a little political, but
no, it's interesting stuff. And I guess that brings in the sort of privacy aspect of it too, and sort of privilege, because now all the rage is these resorts where you don't check your phone, or even just people love to say, oh, I went a few days without unplugging or without being plugged in. But I know you say that that is a luxury if you can kind of go.
Well, yeah, it's real simple. There's all these. Someone I respect a lot is Nathan Jurgensen on Twitter, and he tweets and writes a lot about this. And it's real simple. If you have the kind of money where you can go on a vacation to an island that doesn't have any type of connectivity, they purposely remove it, and you pay extra for it. You don't have an information problem. You have too much money. And I think a lot of times, we don't take into account that a single mom who's checking her phone every few seconds might be waiting for an email from her boss. A single dad might be waiting for an update on a sick child. We don't know how and when people engage with technology. So I think to make passive sweeping judgments on humanity's relationship with it really is to elevate your humanness over someone else's.
Right.
And for me, that's a real dangerous area to be in, because we don't have a lot of choices about when we can use technology and when we can't. Well, that's not to say that some people don't take it to extremes. I mean, people probably look at me, you're so extreme with the way you use technology. But you don't know how I'm using technology. You didn't see me when I was 300 some odd pounds.
Right. And you meditate and stuff too. There are times where you disconnect and kind of, unplug a little bit yourself too.
Yeah, I meditate twice a day. I mean, sitting quietly with technology or without it, I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, clothing is technology. If it were 100,000 years ago, you'd kill for a rain jacket. So, we also have the wrong definition of technology. But yeah, sitting quietly with myself, for at least 15 minutes in the morning and at least 15 minutes at night, sometimes 30 minutes, is important. Because you need to sit with yourself and you need to think about life. And so many applications on our phones don't do that for us. There are a few I love, that kind of give you this reflection. I call it perspective as a service. Mm-hmm. Perspective as a service is when you use an application and it reintroduces you to yourself. So an app like Time Hop, I've been a big fan of theirs for a long time. I don't get paid by any of these companies, so let's be clear right now. But it shows you, a year ago you did this, 2 years ago you did that, 3 years ago. And I'm sorry, if you're in a bad mood, launching that and saying, oh, look, that's what I was doing a year ago, or look how bad I looked a year ago, look how good I look now. It's amazing, but we don't use technology to really see ourselves. We use it to see other people and consume the world. And I think that's
Right.
really the big shift over the next few years.
Yep. You also mentioned this sort of concept of self-awareness is almost as in touch with yourself as you are because of this data. Sometimes you feel maybe even like isolated in that just because of what your scope is. Can you just talk a little bit about that? Is almost too much information not as comfortable maybe?
Yeah, so that was hard to talk to you about because
I
I'd
know.
never talked about that in public before. So yeah, I mean, it's been a journey of 5 years, and a lot of people have known me for the last 6 months, some people the last 2 years. But it has been at times very, very lonely. There's this concept that I learned about at an event called Buddhist Geeks. They have a conference every year called Dark Night of the Soul, and it's this when meditating or this awakening that happens where you just really feel disconnected and in some ways depressed. For me, it was. Um, but that came. What I found was that was happening often, and being aware of other people's unawareness. All right, and I started saying, "Oh my gosh, I'm judging," and no judging, no striving. Sorry to go down this kind of path with you, psychology, but for me that was really important. So I struggled with that, and I worked through that, and a lot of relationships made it through, but unfortunately, most of my relationships did not.
Mm-hmm.
So many of the people that are in my life today are either brand new or literally survived a really dark, dark period because it was hard to watch people just beat themselves up and beat up other people and just be unaware of what they were doing with information and not have to disconnect from that. So it's really lonely sometimes, if I'm out and I'm with friends or I'm out and I'm by myself, or today I went to get my hair cut, and you just see people who are just in essence mountains of information, and they're just throwing it around like Pigpen from Charlie Brown, right? He couldn't get rid of that dirt cloud, right? It was always with him, and they just don't see it for how it affects them or those around them. So fortunately, that ended last year sometime. And again, if you follow the photographs of me, not just the weight loss, just in how I carry myself or how I speak on stage, you can see the confidence start to return. So it's not as dark as it was.
Right. That's great. And I know it's obviously difficult to talk about that sort of thing, especially on this sort of scale and this situation. But I think, it resonates and people can relate to that sort of thing. And again, if this is sort of the shift of where the industry might be headed, it's good sort of, you're living this life that people say is not too far ahead. So I think it's definitely, you can take the good with the bad. Like there's tons of good, you lost so much weight, you're healthier, all these good things. And then also look at some of the speed bumps along the way.
I don't smoke. I meditate. I sleep a good amount. I try to be kinder to myself, which allows me to be kinder to other people. But that was a giant shift. But with any of these shifts, when Google created PageRank, and we had lots of search engines before Google, right? Instant access to information became just addictive. And then as soon as Facebook created, not PageRank, EdgeRank, and our social graph was instantly accessible. That became really, really, the word addictive is probably the wrong one, but people really loved that. And I think as we start to map our own bodies, especially as Apple next week announces the new phone with the new capabilities and a wearable, and you've got HealthKit on Apple, and you've got Google Fit on all the Google devices, Samantha, a year from now, everyone will be doing selfies about their biology. I mean, it's just a reality. Right. Everyone had a meltdown about the fingerprint sensor on the iPhone. And then 2 weeks later, if they couldn't order a pizza with it, they hated life, right? So the event horizon between thinking something's going to break you psychologically and from a privacy point to you needing it to actually function is about 2 weeks. So, I don't think in the future we're all going to, I think it's literally 6 months, 8 months, people will be sharing physical stats. I saw someone on Instagram yesterday, nice guy, lives in Hawaii, good friend of mine, and he had his whole bike ride in there, plus a video of his bike ride, side by side, plus his health stats from the bike ride. And I just looked at this and I just wrote to him, hey, you give good data. And it's just like, he did it, but he didn't, I don't think he really stitched it together that way, but we live in experiences, and information is the route to that experience.
Right. That's great. I'm sure he was happy living in Hawaii, too. I'm sure his natural mood was a little higher than you'd think. So we're getting a bunch of questions, and one of the main questions that people are kind of asking is, if you're tired, if this kind of knocks you out just by getting so much information, is it an exhausting process, or is it just like embedded in you now?
It was exhausting in the beginning, setting up all the systems to collect to write to my Google Calendar, and as a lot of people know, I broke everything down into 10 sections. So health, entertainment, environment, knowledge work is like what you do for every day for money, travel, opinion, content, spirituality. That was exhausting. And then combing through mountains of data 3 years ago to figure these things out was exhausting. I don't really think about it anymore because I have a lot of things that just happen automatically in the house or automatically get fed to me through some system. And it's really just only out-of-bounds stuff. This morning, my ex, who I was with for 17 years, was helping me, and I was really frustrated because something was moved because I'm in the middle of moving, and I kind of like snapped for a second, and then all of a sudden I was just like, oh, okay. And I said, I'm sorry, I really need, I just need to be focused right now. So yeah, it can seem, I can understand where this lifestyle, or at least my behavior, or the way that I communicate could seem overwhelming for people, but I think they're already dealing with all of it. Like you said earlier, they just don't think when they swipe their credit card. They don't think when they get in their car. They don't think when they turn up the thermostat. They don't think when they turn their lights. Every time you touch an application on your phone, they don't think of all the information that's coming out of that experience and what they could use it for. So I think companies, who create, systems that help give people this information in a nice way are going to be the ones that really kind of win out.
Okay. Along those lines, what would you say then is the next big thing? I mean, everyone's talking about HealthKit, everyone's talking about smart home. Is that basically, or like the iWatch, of course. What do you want, basically? What's the next big thing for you?
Back to my slides on SlideShare. I said in 2010 that we would create Body as a platform. That was the first kind of deck I did, and the idea was you'd be able to use human bodies as a compute platform. And Jawbone just this week, or last week, released the earthquake tied to people's wristbands. So literally, they used a whole community to show, in juxtaposition to nature. The next thing I talked about was this concept of, the Internet of Things plus the quantified self, and I call it the internet, right? The internet. And I think if you look at Google and Apple, they both made their place for home and body at both their events this year. So I think what we're going to see this year is a bunch of products that integrate both. Right now, it's a little bit of an extra step to make non-activity, make something in your house do something. But I think next year you'll visit friends who've remixed environments. Ultimately, by the end of the decade, you won't download apps, you'll download environments and habits. No one needs more software to put information in. They need something to look at them and help them understand their life. So I think a habit store and an app store is probably what we'll see in the next 2 years. But it's going to take people to realize that you and your environment are intrinsically linked.
Okay, great. And I think we have maybe like 5-ish or so minutes left, so we have a bunch of questions.
Okay,
so if I can fire them, like a fire round here.
I'll go fast.
Okay, cool. So somebody mentioned the David Edgar's book, The Circle. Have you read that, and what's your feeling on that?
Yeah, last year I had a bunch of people asking me to read The Circle. They're like, you need to read The Circle, it's just like you. So I downloaded it and started listening to it, and got about halfway through it. And I think it's a profound piece of work that really speaks to the world that we live in currently, and some of the nuanced things that happen when you're connected to everything. I think it's a great book. I personally couldn't get all the way through it. I thought it touched on too much. There's a great television series in the UK called Black Mirror. I encourage everybody to check out episodes of Black Mirror. I said on Twitter the other day, the next 10 years are the first 5 episodes of Black Mirror, and the last 10 years were the first 5 episodes of Star Trek. So, you can really figure out everything from those 2 things.
Okay. Okay, and another question, you're so connected, all these different things. Do you ever think about some of the complications that maybe could happen in the future, or is that something that you don't necessarily think about?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I remember what it was like when my mom got a microwave in 1970, and our neighbors told us we all were going to die of cancer. And I remember when I got my first cell phone, people said, you're just going to get a brain tumor. And so yeah, I think about these things. I think it's natural to try to pathologize what we don't understand. If something's going to happen to me, it's going to happen to me, and it's going to happen to a lot of other people. So hopefully that'll work itself out. I'm not real worried about it.
Okay. All right, and moving along, how do you stay on top of everything? Just there's so much data, so much going on. You're getting notifications all the time. There's email. You're working. There's so much. Basically, how do you stay on top of everything, and how do you even find out about what's new since it's always updating?
Okay, so staying on top of everything, I don't. So I just allow life to happen, and I understand that life will bring to me what I need as far as information and news and my own personal information. You run into problems when you try to hold or control life. You know, anybody who's ever tried to hold it too long and then need the restroom will tell you, don't ever do it again, right? So I think it comes down to really understanding what's important to you. You know, on Twitter, on Facebook, in news articles, I just try to put the people in my life who understand what I need, make sure that they bring me information that I enjoy reading. There's always something new. Every day we're curing some disease and some major breakthrough. So if you try to keep up with that, you can't. So the best thing you can do is really understand what's important to you. Important to me was my health and my environment and my kindness to my process, how I thought, how I behaved, and how I treated other people. So I paid attention to those stories. So, you know, set up a good Google alert for robotic cybernetic redheads from Denver, and you won't be overwhelmed with information because you'll just have one article every 6 months.
Right. Okay. All right. So moving along, let's see some of these other questions.
Do some of the trolly ones, because I get the greatest troll questions.
Well, here's one. This is not super trolly, but I'll see what I can do. Do you take everything off when you shower? Is there anything tracking you when you're in the shower?
Actually, I used to, because these are the Fitbit and the Jawbone are water resistant. So I used to shower with them. I used to always have them on, believe it or not. Okay. But I actually take them off now when I shower because I just thought to myself, I just want to be naked when I shower. Right. I don't think I'm going to get that many extra steps in the shower. Right. So, you know, the whole idea of like, you know, I was like, okay, this is kind of silly. So, no, I shower naked.
One really interesting thing that when I was with you, you read my cell phone. You looked at my apps, you looked at my home screen, you were able to, you know, kind of depict who I am and, you know, just like a few seconds, which was kind of crazy. And you used some like key things in order to do that. You were like, if there's a gap on your home screen.
Oh, yeah, I mean, so I call it iPhone palmistry. So, you know, if you take anybody's home screen, and it's probably a little reflective, there's usually things that are telltale signs of who they are digitally. And I always remind people, you know, if you turn your phone off and you're in the sunlight, you can see yourself. But the minute you turn your phone on, you can't see yourself. You see all these applications. But some things I look for are like how much battery someone has left. Do they even turn battery percent on? So do they show battery percent because they have a real, you know, desire to understand how much of their day they have left? Do they have Bluetooth on? Do they have, at night I always look to see if people have Do Not Disturb turned on. What network are they on? And then how they arrange their icons. Do they use a lot of folders, or do they put everything on one screen, or do they put it on a lot of screens? Do they do it by group? But then the thing I always love is people who have room on their home screen or have room on their dock. You know, it's whenever you meet someone who has room on their home screen with a bunch of stuff on the other screens, it always says this is a really hopeful person because they could have moved something on their home screen, but they leave space for more. And I think our relationship with technology really is a telltale sign of our relationship with how we treat ourselves.
Great. All right. And let's see. We're looking.
Too many questions.
There's a lot of them here.
That's what I say. Be faster to the.
Is there one device that you can't live without? Like, is Google Glass like your hub, basically?
No. Gosh. My phone. I mean, people don't consider the phone a wearable, but your phone is the biggest wearable. Right. I wouldn't even say I can't live without it. I mean, I think when you asked me the same question on the porch, I said probably my heart. So that's the one device I can't live without. Yeah. Right? So I need to have my peace of mind and my ability to love. So.
Oh, that's great.
It probably isn't tech though.
Okay. All right, we have a trolley question for you.
Yes.
But this isn't so bad. You get to kind of gauge where you want to go with it. What is the most embarrassing thing you've learned about yourself from your data analytics?
Well, the first intimate thing that was kind of embarrassing was I didn't want to get up and pee in the middle of the night. So I wanted to figure out how late I could have a drink before I would not get up at 3 or 4 to pee. So, like, that was kind of embarrassing because people say, you know, why won't you have a drink? And you're like, well, and you have to tell them, you know, right. I don't want to pee in the middle of the night.
What's the time? What's the cutoff?
It depends. So for anything with caffeine, I can go to about 7 o'clock. I can do water until about 8 o'clock, but I can't drink anything after 8, 8:15. Yeah, I'll be up in the middle of the night.
Huh.
Yeah, I mean, there were some other very intimate things, but I'm sure you people can figure out, the types of things that I really enjoy and the types of things I really don't that are very, very intimate. But, those are things we all take for granted, that we know these types of things. Hasn't been too much embarrassing. I mean, ultimately, it's validated my humanity for me in so many ways. Because when I share these things at conferences or with people privately, they go, "Oh my gosh, I do that too," and yeah, I never, I thought it was just me, and I'm like, no, it's all of us. Okay, so that's kind of cool.
I'm talking about it. That's good. What about, you mentioned when we were together about the selfie and how we are going to be almost in the future like sharing our data with other people, maybe even on the image itself. So I could take a picture of myself and then maybe it would even say like 75 degrees or this is the time or this was my mood or like, you think that could happen in like the next few years?
It's about, I mean, people do it now. I mean, people use Insta Places, they location tag their photos now. They're just not in the photo. Now, there are some photos like Insta Places and Insta Weather that actually put the information right on top of the photo, which is really neat. And Hyperlapse that just got released, that does this kind of hyper time based video. So yeah, I think a lot of that's going to happen. To look at just like Instagram was huge because, Facebook bought Instagram. Well, what they bought was people's moods because filters just represented a mood, right? So I think as services come out that really leverage photographs and then, a call into a health system to overlay your feeling at that moment with the photograph, that's really hot, right? Because like you'd want to know how someone was feeling when they took that picture, right? And I think the only thing that trumps, this age of attentionalism that we live in is intimacy. And if you can be authentic and intimate, and you seem much more approachable and much more to be someone that someone wants to have engagement with. And when your engagements are digital, they have to be really, really intimate. And that means that we have to live in a truly biological, authentic way.
Okay. Along those lines, how do you really think that we're going to live? Like, are we all going to be like you in just a few years?
No,
going to look like you?
No, that's silly. First, I'm I'm an extreme example, early adopter. Always was. Did it with the PCs. Did it with the internet. It's always just the way it is, right? In a few years, I mean, I would hope that we don't have to have garish electronics strapped to us. Mm-hmm. People always say to me, no one used their wearable for very long, and then they put it away. But when I first got a PC, I used it for maybe an hour a month. When I first got internet, I used it for maybe 2 hours a month. When I first got social networking, I maybe used it for 3 hours a month. So our ability to use something and put away doesn't say that it's not going to happen. It means we don't understand its use yet. And I think, in the future we'll use these things, but we'll use them in very intimate ways. So I think the niche market for wearables is going to be around specific use cases, which is why I go to habits and environments, IoT and QS, mm-hmm. because that's really the use case. Our ability to understand how we're living now or project into the future some way, I think it might be lost. If I were a young person today or someone in the job market today, you need to be thinking about in 6 years, how do you design a world or work in a world where you don't interface with a screen? And within 10 years, how do you absolutely interface in a world of just information with no screens? And if you can't figure out what that looks like, if you don't know how to do much more than send email, you probably won't have a job. And a lot of us mm-hmm. have to work another 30 or 40 years. So I think this is very much an economic and very much a privileged conversation, but it's one that needs to be had.
Right. Okay, I think we're running out of time, but this has been great. Is there anything else that maybe I didn't ask you, any last thoughts you want to share with the world? I mean, sharing your story here, like I mentioned in the story, is very brave to kind of come out here and be like, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing. It might be a little extreme, but maybe there's pieces for you here too. So do you have any, thoughts to round out our chat today?
No, I would just ask people to really take time to not look at your kids, not look at your neighbors, not judge people for taking pictures themselves, not judge people for always being on their phones or constantly being in their social networks. Stop it. You're hurting each other, and there's enough pain out there. If this is our lives, we have to be happy with it. Be kind to yourself.
Great. Well, thank you so much, and thank you for everyone who's watching out there as well. And if you haven't checked out this story, be sure to do that on Mashable. It just gives a much deeper look into Chris's life, and the video is really great too. Shares a little bit about his home. But Chris, I know you're moving, so you're gonna have to set up a whole new shop down in Tennessee, right?
Yeah, down in Tennessee, the most connected house is now going to be in Nashville, Tennessee. So.
Right. You'll have to like live tweet the experience of like setting up.
I'm actually orchestrating the house to actually, you'd be able to watch the house in real time. So the dashboard house.
On the internet, like
yeah.
we could watch from like the exterior.
Yeah, just like what you came to, all the information you couldn't see it. You had to be here and experience it.
Right.
I'm actually building something right now with the developer, so the house will be living on the internet all the time.
Wow, that's huge. Well, when it's set up, be sure to send that my way. That's really interesting.
Thank you so much, Samantha, to you and everyone at Mashable for being so kind.
Thank you so much, and thanks everyone. Take care.